Beneath the silent cliffs of the Galilee, where shadows stretch across ancient stone, a single skeleton has forced science to question everything it thought it knew about humanity's past. His name is Ammud, a being neither fully Neanderthal nor fully modern human, but something in between. When his bones were uncovered in a cave above the Ammud River, researchers expected to find another Ice Age survivor, short, heavy, and primitive. What they found instead was tall, refined, and unsettlingly familiar. His skull held a mind larger than any Neanderthal ever measured, and his face, though ancient, bore traces of our own. For decades, scholars tried to confine him within the strict boundaries of evolution's map, but Ammud refused to stay still. He whispered of contact, of convergence, of a forgotten chapter when two human worlds touched and merged. His discovery would not only reshape the story of the Neanderthals, it would rewrite the story of us. In the early spring of 1961, a team of archaeologists ventured deep into the rugged limestone cliffs of the Upper Galilee, following the winding path of the Ammud River until they reached a cave that would soon rewrite part of human history. The dig began like countless others, patient, methodical, cautious, but what they unearthed was anything but ordinary. Buried beneath layers of sediment and stone lay the remarkably complete skeleton of a being both familiar and alien. This discovery, later named Ammud, would become one of the most puzzling finds in the study of human evolution. The skeleton's proportions were immediately striking. Unlike the short, barrel-chested Neanderthals known from the icy plains of Europe, Ammud stood tall and slender, nearly 1.8 meters in height, with long limbs and a narrow frame and anatomy better suited to heat dissipation and endurance than to conserving warmth. His skull was large, housing a cranial capacity of around 1,740 cubic centimeters, greater than that of any known Neanderthal and even larger than most modern humans. Yet its shape refused to conform to expectation. Heavy brow ridges and a broad nose spoke of Neanderthal ancestry, but the high cranium, reduced occipital bun, and refined facial contours hinted at something more modern, a blending of traits that seemed to exist between two human worlds. At the time, however, such a combination was a problem. The reigning theory of human origins, the strict out-of-Africa model, declared that modern humans evolved in Africa and replaced all other archaic species, including Neanderthals, with little to no interbreeding. The idea of hybridization was viewed as unscientific speculation, a romantic distraction from the clear lines of evolutionary progress laid out in textbooks. Within that rigid framework, Ammud became an anomaly that had to be explained away. Some researchers argued that environmental adaptation had shaped his unique body. Others suggested that geological pressure had distorted his skull. But none dared to question the purity of the human lineage. Yet the bones told a different story. Ammud's long limbs, delicate jaw, and modern-like skull vault mirrored fossils found at nearby Levantan sites, such as Skull and Kafsa, which belonged to early Homo sapiens living in the same region tens of thousands of years earlier. The Levant, sitting between Africa and Eurasia, was a natural crossroads where human populations met, mingled, and sometimes merged. Ammud's anatomy seemed to embody that contact zone, part Neanderthal, part something else. Still, for decades, scientific dogma refused to entertain the idea. He was labeled an unusual Neanderthal, filed, photographed, and largely forgotten. It wasn't until decades later, with the advent of digital imaging, CT scans, and 3D modeling, that his skeleton was re-examined and the truth began to emerge. The detailed reconstructions revealed subtle features invisible to the naked eye: the curvature of the cranial vault, the human-like shape of the temporal bone, and the mastoid process traits far closer to modern humans than classic Neanderthals. These findings reignited the debate about what Ammud represented. Was he a regional variant, a hybrid, or a transitional form bridging the gap between two species? In retrospect, his discovery foreshadowed a seismic shift in anthropology that would come half a century later, when geneticists proved definitively that modern humans and Neanderthals had interbred. But in 1961, that truth was still buried, waiting, like Ammud himself, to be uncovered. The tall figure from the cave above the Ammud River became a silent testament to evolution's complexity. A reminder that humanity's story is not a straight line of replacement but a braided stream of contact, adaptation and exchange. His bones, long entombed in stone, whispered of a deeper truth that the boundaries between species were far more porous than anyone had imagined, and that our ancestors were not defined by isolation but by connection. In that silent cave where light once flickered on limestone walls, the echoes of two worlds met and intertwined, leaving behind a single skeleton that refused to fit neatly into the categories we created to explain ourselves. The story of Ammud One extends far beyond bones and dates. It is a window into a vanished world where two kinds of humans met and merged in ways science is only beginning to understand. 55,000 years ago, the limestone cliffs of northern Israel were not the arid ridges they are today, but green, temperate hills laced with rivers and forests alive with gazelles and deer. High above the Ammud River, in a shadowed cave flickering with firelight, a tall, long-limbed Neanderthal lived and died, his body later fossilized into one of the most extraordinary discoveries of the 20th century. The cave preserved not just his skeleton but the remnants of a culture that defied the stereotype of Neanderthals as brutish survivors. Around his resting place, archaeologists found Mousterian stone tools carved with precision, the bones of hunted animals marked by deliberate butchery, and traces of hearths that had burned through countless seasons. These clues reveal a people who understood their landscape intimately, who crafted with purpose, planned their hunts, and shared warmth and labor in family groups. The animal remains, gazelle, deer, bear, show a varied diet and a flexible intelligence, while microscopic traces of hide and plant fibers on tools hint at clothing, shelters, and possibly symbolic craft. Even the position of Ammud One's skeleton suggested care. He appeared to have been placed in a shallow pit, perhaps the earliest whisper of ritual burial. If true, this means his kin were capable of reflection, of seeing meaning in death, and of honoring it, a profoundly human gesture. His body, like his features, stood between two worlds. The muscular strength of classic Neanderthals fused with the refined proportions of modern humans. His skull's broad vault, high forehead, and balanced face point to adaptation not for the icy plains of Europe, but for the warmer, varied climates of the Levant. Here, in this fertile crossroads between Africa and Eurasia, different species of humans overlapped. Again and again, exchanging tools, behaviors, and genes. Ammud One likely belonged to one of these hybrid communities, shaped both by environment and by encounter. The Levant was a bridge, not a border, a meeting ground where the evolutionary story of Homo sapiens and Neanderthals intertwined. Inside that world, language may have already taken root. His vocal anatomy shows a structure nearly identical to ours, including a hyoid bone capable of supporting speech. Combined with brain regions inferred from the cranial cavity, this suggests he could communicate, plan hunts, and teach others through spoken language. His people were not mute beasts, but articulate beings with emotion and cooperation at their core. They controlled fire, painted with ochre, and may have adorned themselves with ornaments. Every layer of the cave contradicts the old myth of Neanderthals as mindless cave dwellers. And when genetic science finally caught up tens of thousands of years later, Ammud One's mystery became clarity. Modern humans carry fragments of Neanderthal DNA, meaning interbreeding was not an anomaly but a constant reality. The bloodlines had mingled long before history began. The neat evolutionary ladder once imagined by scientists gave way to a web-braided stream of species, crossing and recrossing paths. In this new light, Ammud One is not an oddity, but a key, a tangible link in the chain of hybrid humanity. He is proof that we are all, in part, Neanderthal. Their legacy flows in our immune systems, our skin, our emotions, and our minds. To stand today among the quiet hills of Galilee is to feel that connection still pulsing beneath the soil. The same winds that once cooled his brow now sweep across the ruins of his cave, and the same stars he watched glimmer above us. His reconstructed face, built from 3D scans of his skull, is hauntingly familiar-browed, yet gentle, ancient yet human. Looking at him, we see not an ancestor or a stranger, but a reflection, a reminder that the human story was never pure or separate. For half a century, science failed to recognize this truth because it preferred simplicity over complexity, certainty over ambiguity. Ammud, once tall, graceful bones stood as quiet evidence against that arrogance, waiting for the age of genetics to vindicate them. Now, freed from dogma, his story humbles us. Evolution is not a march, but a mingling, not replacement, but relationship.